Hello there, and welcome back to Mike's Music Corner channel, where my motto is keep it real. I always like to do a quick recap on what this series of videos is all about. Basically, I'm upgrading and modifying this guitar. This guitar is a Fender Squire Affinity Telecaster. You can certainly tell it's a Telecaster, I'm sure. So far, I've had previous videos where I modified the neck and the fretboard, and last video I replaced all the hardware on the guitar. Those videos are posted if you want to go back and look at any of those. The video you're about to watch, however, is going to be a little bit different. That's because I shot it on location in town where we have a local, I guess I would call it a guitar service center. It's just locally owned. The name of the guitar service center is Chris Fleming Guitars. Some of you might recognize the name Chris Fleming. The Chris Fleming is fairly known in the Fender circles. In fact, he used to work for Fender. Anyway, he owns this guitar service center in town where I live, Prescott, Arizona. It's also associated with a guitar store called Grey Dog. And I had to elicit help from their guitar tech or guitar luthier. I think he's really more of a luthier than just a tech. His name is Sean, and I shot on location at his shop because I had to have my nut changed. Now, a little backstory about the nut. I tried to change the nut myself from a plastic nut to a TUSQ nut. However, I botched it up. I didn't show any of that on video. There was no reason to do that. So my backup plan was to take it down to Sean and have him make the change, which he did. I recorded his work at his shop, and because I did it on location, one thing I want to warn everyone about is that the audio quality is not going to be that great because I shot it strictly from my phone and I did not have my audio DAW equipment there with me and my computer there to get a good sound quality from a separate audio file. So it is what it is, and hopefully the quality is good enough to follow along. And so without further ado, let's watch the video where Sean does his magic. And he had to do some magic because there were some challenges with the nut change. And I'll let him explain those challenges as you watch the video. Please enjoy the video, and I'll see you later. Keep it real. Okay, hi, welcome back to this week's video. I promised you I would have a special treat for you today, and we're actually on location. I'm on location in the town of Prescott where I live, and I'm visiting our local guitar service center, and I want to introduce you to Sean. I'm going to Sean introduce himself and tell you a little about him and a little bit about what he does here, or about his establishment here where they work on guitars.
Yeah, my name's Sean. I work here with Chris Fleming at Chris Fleming Guitars. We are mostly a guitar repair shop. We do some custom instruments as well. This one behind me, I'm noticing, yeah, that's one of Chris's custom builds. It's just getting finished up. But most of the work that comes through our shop is repair, and that's what we're mostly focused on here. And I believe we're going to do some nut work and setup work on your guitar today.
We have a little detour with my plans. What I was going to do today, what we were supposed to do today on the agenda, was to change out the electrical harness, the electronics for the control panel. But when I tried replacing that myself, and I warned you that this might not work, I wasn't able to get the nut out without damaging it, and I realized that I had to get a professional to work on it. So that's why I'm here today with Sean. So instead of the electronics and the harness, we're going to work on, or I should say Sean is going to work on that nut and try to get that nut out and replace it with a TUSQ nut I bought.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going to happen yet, and we're just going to give it a go.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens. So.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, what we got here is a pretty classic situation where a nut has been glued in to the fingerboard. I'm trying to watch the camera while I move my finger and throwing me off. Yeah, so the nut's been glued in. Lots of times the nut is glued in. Oftentimes they use too much. So it becomes challenging to remove the nut without damaging it. In this case, we're replacing it. We don't care if we're damaging it. We just don't want to damage the guitar too much in the process. Certain guitars, that's way harder than others. I know this one's already freed up. I've already done a little bit of this, but I'm just gripping it and working, and I'm putting pressure on it a little bit to try to grab it without chopping off the top, because I can. And then tilting side to side, wiggling to try to work it free from the glue. that is in the slot. This is basically step one in this kind of situation, is just try to grab it and pull it, you know. And with these plastic nuts, sometimes they come out in pieces, sometimes they come out all at once. There we go. All right.
I heard it.
Yeah, and I'm going to try to grab the other side as well. Okay, there we go. So that was a nice tight fit with quite a bit of glue. So yeah, you can see there's the shiny, the white shiny stuff at the bottom of that slot, all that frosting. That's just dried, you know, cake glue. We want that out of there. And the main reason being, all that unevenness and gunk in there prevents a nice tight fit, where we have a hard material contacting the wood on all sides. For tone reasons, for structure reasons, just, you know, long-term reliability, we want a nice tight fit where the material fits in there firmly without the need for glue to hold the nut in. We can still put some in at the end to aid it, keep it from sliding side to side, but it shouldn't be holding the nut in like it was in this case. So now what I'm going to have to do is take a small chisel and try to work all the glue out of this slot. This stuff should come pretty easily. That's pretty clean. Now we've got this nut, I'll show in the camera as well. It's a radius nut and it's got this nub on the bottom. We'll have to sand or file that off before we install it. I do want to check and make sure that the radius of this nut at least closely matches the radius of this slot, assuming it is radius. And that is our, I think our first hold up.
I assumed it was radius.
I typically assume the same for most Fender style stuff, but this does not appear to be a radius slot. Let me confirm
Interesting.
that first.
Yeah, from here now it's looking flatter than I thought.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, it's certainly flatter than the radius of the fingerboard, which would be unusual for any radius slot. Yeah, it's flat.
Interesting.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm assuming part of the thinking of this nub that they provide you is so that you can install this on a flat radius, because it's still supported in the center.
Oh, okay.
That is okay, but not ideal.
Mm-hmm.
The front to back fit that we have here in terms of the amount of play side to side,
Yeah.
again, will that cause a problem? Probably not. So I would say it's probably acceptable to install this if we really want to go for it, because it's close in lots of other ways. I can see that the string spacing to the outer E's is acceptable.
Okay.
It's not going to be too close to the edges, I don't think. We'll have to double check. It's just a little long on either end, which is great because I can trim that.
Okay.
The front to back of it, you know, in terms of its thickness and how it fits in the slot, not ideal, because it's going to require glue to keep it in place. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a pretty good measurement of the thickness of this nut, and that's just going to give me an idea. So it's 1/8. The slot is going to be just a hair more than 1/8. Yeah, it's about 130, so that's about 5 thousandths oversized. Cleaner and flatter, I can get that shelf.
Probably the better the glue is going to hold too.
Yeah, yeah, and the better the glue's going to hold, the better when we go to make a nut that fits well, and the better supported this thing's going to be.
Now, do you prefer bone or do you prefer TUSQ?
Look, I prefer bone because I work with it all the time, and because it looks great when you polish it out, and because it has natural variation in it.
Because that still looks plastic.
No matter what you do, it's
Yeah.
going to look like plastic.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, a piece of bone can look like jewelry when you really make it
nice
properly.
Okay. Well, we'll have to talk about that when it comes back.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you do deal with natural variation in the bone, and
That's what I've heard. And
Yeah.
one reason TUSQ is very uniform, I guess.
Yes, uniform is part of the advantage. Yeah. Okay. I think what we'll do first here is go ahead and string this up just with outer E strings.
Okay.
I'm going to determine where the side-to-side spacing is, and then we're going to trim the ends. What we're going to do is we're going to make sure the alignment is good side to side. We're going to make sure that, and I'm going to get the ends to fit. Got the locking tuners.
Yep.
A note about locking tuners. In a lot of the instructions for these things, they will instruct you to, I think they'll often tell you, like, put the string, let me get my wand, put the string straight through it, tighten it up, lock this, and then wind it up, right? I don't really recommend that.
Okay.
I recommend giving it a little slack so that it has a little bit of winding around the post.
Okay.
Especially as we get up to the thinner strings, the plain strings. And the reason being, if I just tighten this like this, lock it in, and start winding it up, a lot of tension gets put on this corner that's breaking around the post as the string gets wound. Okay. All of the string tension gets put on that one part of the string where you're bending it and kinking it. You're weakening it naturally. When the string is wound around the post, tension is distributed into the post.
Oh, gotcha.
And so,
interesting.
Yeah, and so giving it at least a wind, or maybe even just half a wind,
Okay, it's good to know.
is good, because I think
I would just shove that thing down in there and let it do its thing. But
so I'll still do a little bit of that kind of business, and honestly, half the time I just ignore the lock and I'll just wind it like I would. I'll wind it up kind of just like that, and make sure everything's good, and then I'll lock the string. But it's almost it's almost unnecessary. Now, I know that this kind of circumvents one of the bonuses of locking tuners.
Yeah.
In terms of the speed of the restring. I find the breakage to be more of an issue. So I think if you don't do this, you're going to break your string more often.
Okay.
It's going to break at that point more often. If you're trying to pull the on-stage 30-second restring trick.
Well, I'm never on stage, so we don't have to worry about it. So.
In this position here, I think it's pretty equal. There's, I'm looking at the amount of fret outside of each string.
Yeah. It seems about the same to me.
That's about fairly well centered, I'd say.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to basically trim the edges of this nut. And I'm going to clearly mark for myself the bottom edge of the nut, where it's meeting the guitar there.
Yeah, I see it poking out. So.
Which reveals something.
Oh.
The nut is not currently sitting all the way down. I think the nubbin is taller than the outside edges. So, we'll have to address that. That's okay. All I'm going to do...
I really like it every time you say that's okay.
It's all okay.
You said that about 10 times now, and I thought, okay. Whew.
Yeah, we can fix anything. So.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. All I'm going to do is sand or possibly file, I haven't decided, a little height off of this nubbin, and then sit it down, and I'll just visually check on either side and make sure that it's firmly resting on either side. But this is where it starts to get a little,
this seems like a little science and a little art both, so.
Always, yeah. So I've just got some sandpaper on the side of a file here. That looks pretty square, that looks pretty good. Drop that in. So I can actually feel that it's more firmly touching down on either corner now.
Nice.
And now I can actually feel that this nut will not rock side to side. If it'll slide, but it won't rock. So the edges are firmly seated down on either side of this now. Again, I'm going to check my spacing up top. Make sure I like the position. I'm tighten this string up to help me hold it a little. Does that look straight to you?
Um,
How do you like that?
I think so. Yeah, it's about as straight as my eyeballs can tell.
I think mine too. Go ahead and mark, and I'll just try to get the pencil into that corner.
And you can see a black pencil lead on a black tusk. Then okay.
Yeah, you can.
I guess it gets a little silvery on it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay.
You got to use your light, but you can. So I'll mark the bottom. I'll kind of mark the back edge here because it's a little further out.
Mm.
The neck, flares out there.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of mark the front edge there. All I'm going to do is put it in the guitar and feel the edge of this next to the edge of the neck and see if anything sticks out, if there's any corners that I want to knock back or anything. Go ahead and tighten up the strings just to hold it. Make sure I like my spacing. Now I'm feeling the edge. And it's great. It's nearly there. The front edge is pretty much flush. The back edge, there's a tiny bit of a corner. All right, so we got the strings on the guitar. We are looking at the nut. I was sighting the neck while it was under tension and noticing that this neck has a bit of a back bow to it, even without any truss rod tension. This is a one-way truss rod. I could explain what all that means as I did, but basically it means we're a little compromised in the setup that we can get out of the guitar. We'll probably end up with a different neck in the future, maybe not, but we'll do what we can with this one. I'm checking the height of the string over the first fret. This is referred to as nut action, nut height, any of those things. And most of the time when you make a new nut or fit a nut for a guitar, you have to do quite a bit of cutting in to get those strings to the correct height. It's very particular. There is more or less an objectively correct height for those strings over that first fret. There's a little bit of subjectivity there, but it's very small. You really want them to be right. So this nut, amazingly, is pretty close. I put it in, I'm checking the strings. There's different ways to check the heights. Ideally, we do a good setup on the guitar first, and this is a very common thing, you'll see people put their finger here at the second fret. Well, as if you're playing, it's the third fret. But what I'm doing is I'm creating a straight line between the top of the second fret here and the nut here. This string is forming a straight line under tension, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to show the camera. I depress the string. The string is a straight edge that rides from the top of the second fret up to the bottom of the nut slot.
Yeah.
And I'm observing the gap, how far it has to travel before it hits the first fret here.
Okay.
That distance. This is a really particular thing. It takes a while to kind of train your eyes for it, but that gap right there is higher than it needs to be.
There needs to be some gap, right?
Some gap, but extremely minimal.
Okay.
If the nut were a perfect material that never wore out and we were perfect players that never hit the open string too hard, it would be the same height as the fret. That's not really the case, so we leave a little room. We don't need to do a lot here. The high strings, when I do my check here, I actually like the height of the high E string. I like the height of the B string. The G, we start to get a little higher than I like to go, and then on and up.
Okay. So the bottom four strings are what we're doing.
Yeah, we're going to say low E through G. We're gonna adjust downwards a bit. I'm cutting the high E string, not to lower it, but because I want to make sure that the string is cleanly voicing off of the very front edge of this nut.
Oh, interesting.
If this slot is sitting too flat, and the string is not able to just take off cleanly from the front edge, we can get intonation and tone problems. So I want to back cut that slot. I'm going to look at the angle down to the tree, pretend the string's there, and create a nice little path for it. I can use my light on the bottom of the slot and see exactly what I'm doing while I'm cutting here. It won't take much. This will not be seen on camera, but I'll try to explain it. Okay, so I can tell just from the texture of it now that I've filed all the way up to the very front edge. So I'm going to put the E string back. This is called voicing or re-voicing.
Well, there sure is a lot more to a nut than anybody would realize, I would think.
Oh yeah,
So,
we didn't even
yeah.
make this one.
Yeah, and
you
we
know?
didn't even make this one.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so now I'm cutting the G string, and I'm going to actually cut it for height. So you'll see me checking by looking at the amount of bounce. I cleaned up to the voicing point like you saw before, and then I made about 2 more swipes past that point, and it's now low enough for me to move on. It really only takes that much most
Wow,
of the
it's
time.
very delicate.
All right, I like that height. Move on. I try to kind of taper a little. So there's a little more room under the low E than there is under the high E. The string has a little more headroom. And there's a reason for that. You don't often, as a player, you don't often like rip the high E string as an open string, right?
No, I think it's true, probably.
Yeah. But if you're like,
I'm a delicate player in general, anyway.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I mean, every player is different that way.
Yeah.
And some people, maybe their style calls for it, and certain things would. But let's say you're doing your SRV thing. You're
Yeah.
tuned to E flat, so there's already less tension on the string.
Right.
And you're ripping the open. You're raking back and ripping that open E string all the time as part of the sound of the music.
Yeah.
Hitting it pretty dang hard. Well, if you don't have a little extra room at the nut, it's going to buzz the whole time.
Gotcha.
And so, honestly, that doesn't always sound bad. It's often okay, but it can bug people.
Little acoustic distortions.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it can be a little much. So you leave a little extra room on these lower strings, because when you're hitting that open E or open A for the chord, you hit it a little harder than you think. Most of us do.
I think so.
Yeah.
I know I do.
All right. So
not on purpose, but.
So I like the heights now.
All right. Nice.
I'm going to say that's all cut in well, and it wasn't much. And I like the sides.
It's all very interesting, because I really thought, ignorantly, that you slap the nut in, string her up, and go home. So there's a lot more to it than people realize.
Yeah, there is, and you can, but you'll end up with a guitar that's like,
of course.
Why is this falling off the side?
Yeah.
And why is the
right?
And,
why is it buzzing or whatever?
Why is it
be,
buzzing?
so,
why does it stick out like an inch from one side?
Yeah.
It's like, well, because
that high E string was so close to the edge that when I was playing, it literally got stuck under the frets, right?
Yeah, that can happen, and that also shouldn't happen, but it does, because the fret ends start to stick out past the edge of the wood as the wood shrinks laterally. Which happens on all guitars regardless of quality. And also the fret ends can get loose and the frets pop out of their slots, and you get this little hook that hangs on the string. If you wait a year or two after a guitar is new, and then you file these ends back, usually we can make that a lot better. These have already been done once. I can tell.
I did.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah. So they're pretty good.
Thank you.
First
time, maybe the last time I ever did them.
Yeah, I mean, no, they're pretty good. Our spacing's good now. Our height's good now. These corners are nice. The fit is good on the ends.
Hope you enjoyed watching Sean save my butt with that nut. He did a great job. As you can tell with Sean, he's more of a craftsman than just a tech. Sean takes great pride in what he does, and I'm very grateful for that. And in fact, Sean has a couple more tasks ahead. The next 2 videos are actually going to be about Sean as well. That's because the next video is going to be all about changing the electronics, the control panel, the pots, and the switch, all that kind of good stuff. And the final video will be all about Sean replacing my 2 pickups on this guitar. Anyway, that's a wrap this week, where we keep it real. I hope you enjoy the next few videos. Thank you for hanging in there with me. And as always, thank you very much.